Um, hey y'all, what's going on? It's Spoken, and I just wanted to quickly pass through and share something with you guys that really, really rocked me today. So yeah, I'm currently going through this book. It's called Dug Down Deep by Joshua Harris. Uh, Great book so far, and hope to actually finish this one. But yeah, so today I was reading about him talking about the person of Jesus, like who Jesus Christ is, and he referenced Paul the Apostle in Colossians chapter 1, verse 15, and chapter 2, verse 9, where it says, "For he," referring to Jesus, "he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation." And the verse 16 says, "For by him all things were created, whether they be thrones or dominions, principalities, powers, all things, for by him and for him, all things were created." And then verse 2 and 9 later on says that uh, for the whole fullness of for the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. For in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. And I was just really thinking about what that means. Like when you say he's the image of the invisible God. Generally, whenever we say God, we don't really fully understand what we're talking about. Like we picture this amorphous, bodiless spirit being, you know. Um, and when we talk about Jesus, subconsciously we almost disconnect too. Like we say Jesus and we picture Jesus the man. Like I mean, clearly we know he was God. We will clearly acknowledge that he was the same. He was equal to God. He was both God and man. We know that. But at least for myself, I found that generally when I hear Jesus, almost very subconsciously, in a almost distant kind of way, I sort of disconnect Jesus from God. But then I was thinking about that today. If you say he's the image of the invisible God, what does that really mean? If you can sort of picture like you have this thing or this person who has literal blood and literal flesh and literal bones, and he represents the invisible God, but not just a loose representation like other religions, like this idol represents God, but no, this is actually God. Like if you can sort of conceptualize it, like when you stand in front of a mirror, when I stand in front of a mirror and I look, what I see in the reflection, I see my image, my reflection, I see the image of a very visible and very flawed spoken, you know? Um, and so if you can just sort of imagine that if I have this mirror and I'm looking at my reflection, I'm looking at myself in the mirror, on the other side comes my image. And if you can imagine that if there were other beings or other things living on this other side of the mirror, what they would see would be very real to them. It would be a very real human being, a very real person on that side. And for all intents and purposes, what they would be seeing would indeed be me because that is my reflection. That is me. When I move my hand like this, he moves his hand like that. And so if you can sort of picture that, if you can sort of picture God, you know, and this is just me conceptualizing it, looking through this mirror, and on this side is eternity. God looks into this mirror, and on the other side is the world we live in. And what shows up on the other side? Jesus, as his image and as his reflection. And it's such a simple, I mean, it's not simple, but it's something we say all the time. But I think sometimes it's really important that we just stop and, like Paul Washer says, think great thoughts about God, think great thoughts about Jesus. Um, because then maybe we're able to fully, and not fully, but at least gain a better understanding of who he is and what he did, and that can consequently spur us on to live a life of holiness and righteousness worthy of a believer of the children of God. But it's amazing if you can think about that. And then verse 16, when it says, "For by him all things were created." And if again, this is still referring to Jesus. You know what I mean? So if you can sort of picture that Jesus, that person with the literal blood and the literal bones and literal flesh and literal nerves and literal hair, etc., was there in creation. And not only was there in creation, has always had an active hand in how world events would turn out. So it says, for by him all things were created, whether they be thrones or dominions, referring to this world we live in. Think of whatever empire has crossed this world, whether it's the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, African, Egyptian, Alexander the Great, or even if you look at present day, some of the world powers, the United States, England, wherever you want to look at, it says, for by him all things were created. And then that even extends to the supernatural, to the spiritual, when it says, whether thrones, dominions, or principalities or powers, for by him and for him all things were created. Like, that is such, I mean, just a crazy thing to come to grips with. That, I mean, as you can tell, I'm still sort of reeling over this and still trying to conceptualize and understand that Jesus is God, and then chapter 2, Colossians chapter 2, verse 9, then says, for in him dwells the whole fullness of deity bodily. And it's just like, I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's amazing. I think I would encourage you guys that whenever you think about Jesus, whenever you say Jesus, um, as best as you can, try not to subconsciously disconnect him from God. And again, I know we never actually do that. We believe he's God, but for some reason, again, I find that when we speak, at least for me, when I say Jesus, I don't actively process him as this God, this invisible God. So yeah, just guys, I want to encourage you guys to really ponder on these things and really just, again, like Paul Washer says, think great thoughts about God. And I know I can never fully communicate the reality of what it means that Jesus Christ was God, but I hope the whole conceptualization in the mirror, God in eternity, looking at it in the mirror, the image that comes out, this is the world you see is Jesus. So literally, Jesus is God and the Son of God at the same time. Like, it's, yeah, guys, just really, if you can, ponder on that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And love you guys. Spoken out.